The agenda that we're going to cover will start with first vocabulary check to describe the difference between a reservation versus marking. Then we'll go through some common use case scenarios or configurations for each of them. And as a bonus topic, we'll get into discussion of reservation hierarchy and the concept of batch or serial reservations above or below and what that means. So let's start first with a vocabulary lesson now on reservations versus marking. A reservation in dynamics refers to claiming but not consuming on-hand or available physical inventory. It reduces what's considered available, but it doesn't reduce what's on hand. There's no financial posting or debit and credit on this. It does not affect the financial costing or impact, or the costing method itself on the items are not relevant for a reservation. It simply claims or prevents consumption of quantities. Marking, on the other hand, reserves both a quantity of inventory and selects a specific cost that will be used for the transaction when it eventually is fulfilled. This overrides or bypasses whatever costing method you might have on the item, such as FIFO or LIFO. You can use marking against either available inventory or even an open supply order, such as a purchase order or transfer or production order that has not been received into inventory yet. So you can claim dibs on an upcoming receipt before it shows up on hand. Marking is not supported if the cost method is either standard or moving average. Okay? Now, the financial marking uses what's called a financial lot, and a lot is assigned on every inventory or order transaction going into and out of inventory. That's not to be confused with what most of us think of in terms of lot serial or batch tracking of an item. So you can see in the screenshot at the bottom of my screen, different product receipts and issues show batch numbers on the left for a lot controlled part, serial numbers. So that first item, I have 3 different receipts, all under one batch ID, 3 different serial numbers. And in the third column I've got highlighted, you'll see the financial lot, which is a completely different number. Those first 3 records were all under one financial lot. Right below that is a different part that is not lot serial controlled. It does not have a batch number on the receipt. It does not have a serial number on the receipt, but that receipt record shows a financial lot. So I want to stress that the financial marking is picking which of those financial lots, supply records, and costs will be used when we consume the material. So now let's look at some common scenarios and the baseline data that we've got set up to support this and show you the differences. For a sample product I've set up, it's using FIFO costing method, first in, first out. It is batch tracked for inventory purposes, so there will be a batch number. You can see I've received 3 different batches, batch 1, batch 2, and batch 3, at 3 different costs for each of those batches. The first was at $20 per unit. The second receipt was at $30 per unit, and the third receipt was at $50 per unit. So that gives us, at the moment, 27 units on hand and available. So you can see the 3 different batches, 3 different totals there. Now we're going to process a sales order for 5 pieces against this item and show the reservations and marking and how this all works. So once we've booked our sales order for 5, you can see that my on hand for the item still remains at 27. So the available physical quantity is still 27. I've got on order 5 pieces for the sales order. So my net available inventory is 22. I have not consumed any inventory yet, nor have I made a reservation. It just shows the running balance that 27 on hand, 5 are spoken or are on order. So in theory, I should only be selling a remaining 22. So unless I'm using formal date control on my sales order line, such as ATP or CTP, and most clients use something like none or something to that effect for date control, the total available does not prevent me from overselling. So the second screen below, you can see that I have accepted a second sales order for a total of 50 more parts. So of my 27 on hand, I now have sold 55 of them, and I have a total available of negative 28. I don't have negative 28 inventory. I just have oversold beyond what I have on hand and available. Okay. So now this is where a reservation might come in handy because I have two different requirements, two different orders competing for the same on-hand and available quantity of 27. So the sales order reservation will take the available inventory and reduce it, committing it to that sales order. I do that from the sales order line. You can see on the line detail, there's an inventory pop-up menu there. And within the inventory pop-up menu, I can select the reservation to process the 5-piece quantity against the on-hand. And after doing that, you'll see that it does not affect the on-hand quantity of inventory. It still shows 27 on hand, but now it shows 5 are physically reserved. It shows available physical inventory has been reduced by 22, which means I can't reserve 25 or 26 of that physical inventory. And the available for reservation matches that 22. Now, I did that reservation manually from the sales order line. I can certainly do that for exceptions or hot orders or something like that. But in most implementations, you'll want to automate that reservation process, either initially when you book the sales order or when you release the sales order to the warehouse for shipment. So now let's look at financial marking and that option. The sales order line below is for 10 pieces. That's going to be the next order we're going to try to process in this scenario. So I can reserve this against available inventory, or I can use marking, which does both a reservation and selects a financial lot and the cost that will be associated with a sales order. So if you recall, I had 3 different costs on my receipts, one at $20, one at $30, and one at $50. So if I reserve and ship this second order right now, it's going to go against the first 10 pieces out of inventory, and the FIFO cost enforced against the product is going to be that first unit cost of $10 each. Now, in the marking screen that you'll see, this might be a little bit confusing because I've got inventory records of batch 1, 2, and 3, and I've got financial lots that show a cost of $20, $30, and $50 per unit. And because they appear side by side, we might assume that batch inventory 001 is the $20 items, batch 3 are the $50 items. And I want to clarify that we're talking physical versus financial lots. They're two different concepts. This will make sense in the next couple of screens. So now let's go a little further through with the financial marking scenario. I go from the same menu, and instead of picking reservation, I choose the marking option. Within the marking option, you'll see the pop-up window is slightly different, and I've got both the financial lot displayed. In this case, I'm picking the third financial lot, 22293, which to the left of it shows inventory batch 003. So and by selecting that, you'll notice at the very bottom of my screen, it has now shown that the cost price applied to this sales order line is going to be $50 when I pick and ship it. So I am effectively marking and selecting the third receipt's cost to apply to the sales order. Okay. Now, after marking, I have reduced my physical on hand, or not my physical on hand. I have reduced my physical available from 22 to 12. I've reduced my available to reserve from 22 to 12, and I'm still oversold. So I still have not consumed this yet. Works the same as a reservation so far. But now when I pick and ship the inventory, instead of the FIFO cost, which would be $10, I'm going to be getting the selected cost, marked cost of $50 per unit. So bringing this, closing the loop here, you can see that I had marked from that first screen on the left, third financial lot, which was inventory batch 003. The right side of my screen shows that even though I've marked and reserved that financial lot, somebody sneaked in there while I was doing this slide deck and grabbed and shipped 1 unit or inventory adjusted away 1 unit of physical batch 003. So that shows that even though I marked and reserved what might look like the inventory batch 003, I wasn't affecting that inventory batch. I was only reserving the financial lot 22293 to mark the cost. So whoever grabbed that batch 003 physical batch used FIFO accounting, which would have been valued at $10 each first unit on the item. Okay? It's a very confusing concept there until you modify your screens to display both the financial lot and the physical lot if you have lot or serial controlled materials. So now let's look at if I wanted to lock up both the financial lot and that physical lot to say, no, I want batch 003 physical lot to be shipped on my sales order as well. Well, to specify specific physical inventory units, such as batches or serials, we have to invoke the reservation hierarchy and how that's configured. So on the left side of my screen, I've got an inventory reservation hierarchy described as batch above. And what we mean by above, if you look at the hierarchy details on the right, that is above the location dimension. Location dimension is where the warehouse takes control. Above that location dimension, we in the sales order line and customer service are allowed to control and influence the selection of site, warehouse, things like that. All of the dimensions above location, we dictate and control on the sales order line, and we can reserve against those specifically. Anything beginning with location and below is delegated to the warehouse to choose whatever they wish to do through location directives or manually or any kind of automation down in the warehouse. So a reservation hierarchy configured to put the batch number above the location with the allow reservations checked means I can claim a reservation of a specific batch, in this example, of inventory and prevent the warehouse from using that batch for some other reason or other purpose. The term batch or serial below, in the second example on the right, defers that decision to the warehouse. I cannot reserve a specific batch or lot if the part is associated with that second hierarchy on the right. So, in conclusion, let's wrap up what we've covered. The term reservation and the transaction in Dynamics reserves or claims available inventory in advance of shipment or production order or whatever to prevent that quantity from being oversold or consumed for some other requirement. It doesn't reduce inventory. It simply puts a claim against the use of it for any other purpose until that reservation is met through a pick or ship or relaxed, canceled the reservation. The term marking in Dynamics both reserves against the available supply without consuming. It also overrides the financial costing method that would normally be applied and picks a specific financial lot or receipt or cost value to be used. And the last concept is to reserve a specific physical unit, such as a batch or serial in inventory tracking dimension, relies on the reservation hierarchy that places that dimension above the location within its hierarchy.